So it's been about a year since I began reading Junji Ito. I started off with Uzumaki and have since read Geo, Tomie, the Frankenstein adaptation, and a number of short stories. I am, I suppose, a fan now. I suppose I am a fan of his manga. And as a result of that, I immediately began seeking out other things I could read from him. And the one that stuck out to me the most, the one that I was most enthusiastic about getting into, was Remina. And at the time, it had not been released in English. But in the year since, it has been. It is now officially available in English for, I believe, the first time. I picked it up, read through it, and uh, not not very good. Halfway good. Halfway decent. Like it's not like completely over the top ridiculous the way Geo can be or some of the Uzumaki stories, but it's not particularly engaging either, which is really kind of a shame because I think there are lots of really good elements here, lots of really good ideas that just don't really come together very well. And I do think the main reason for this is the focus on like the general concept. Well, okay, so okay, I don't care for any of the characters in this. Like when I got excited for this manga, when I wanted to learn more about it, when I wanted to read more from Junji Ito, the thing that stuck out to me about this one in particular was the core idea of a giant fucking star coming and eating the planet Earth, right? Like that's what Remina is supposed to be about. Like a carnivorous planet that comes and eats everything, like everything in the solar system, I believe, as it's depicted in the manga. I found the concept incredibly interesting, and I just had to pick it up. Right, what I got instead was this weird thing about a girl who's named after this planet, who's besieged by this cult, and she's around all these people who are protecting her because they love her, but then they backstab her. In a lot of ways, it seems to be more about the idol industry than it seems to be about the fucking planet being eaten by a giant star. You know what I mean? Like it's so incredibly frustrating. Like reading this thing, seeing this stupid bitch go around like with these guys, like with these simps, and expecting things to work out. Like that really is this. Like we always talk about simps and like how they aren't doing themselves favors. When we usually talk about simps, we talk about how they don't really do themselves favor, how they do themselves any favors, how they treat other people, like their weird obsessions, and that's in place here too. But like in this one, it kind of goes in the opposite direction, where like it shows just how useless simps can be for the women they simp for. Because Remina is extremely susceptible to simps. Like I don't think I've ever read a manga where a girl has had this many simps. Like I would go so far. Well, I suppose Tomie, also by Junji Ito, also had a lot of simps. But like Remina's a normal girl as opposed to Tomie literally being a kind of super succubus. So I have no idea like what to make of that. Is that a thing of Junji Ito's? Like, does he really hate simps? Because that's kind of the impression I get reading his work. So yeah, this isn't about the fucking star eating the planet. Like that's honestly just a background event. It's about Remina going around surviving this cult that seems to be comprised mostly of former fans, like people who believe that because the pop idol Remina shares her name with this planet, that means that like, oh, she's somehow responsible for this. And I really hate to say this because I really do think that the core idea of this, like the theme of fame being fickle and people sort of like expecting things from you or simping for you because they want to get out of something out of you. Like Remina is harassed and sexually harassed and exploited a lot throughout this by a number of different men. And obviously, she doesn't like it. She didn't want to be an idol anyway. She was kind of pressured into it. In a lot of ways, like it feels like this story could have been more interesting. Like it feels in a lot of ways like maybe if this was a longer manga, maybe on par with like Uzumaki, with an overarching story with a lot of different characters, all of who are trying to deal with the Hellstar in a variety of different ways. We could have followed the cult, we could have followed the scientists, we could have followed like Ramina's fans. Instead, what we basically get is Remina being dragged along by her simps, basically getting the shit kicked out of her for no reason, while Remina just sort of sits there doing nothing. And there's all these weird, like, sort of implications that, like, it's not exactly scary. You would think that, like, a giant fucking Hellstar coming down and, like, eating our entire planet would be terrifying, but, like, much like the worst stories in Uzumaki or Geo, like it's kind of that like try-hardish, like, oh no, like it's kind of like that try-hardish sort of way, the way that doesn't really leave much of an impact. You know what I mean? Like the government like filed United Nations fires a bunch of missiles at the Hellstar. It doesn't work. Like there's no real build up to it. There's no real there's no real fallout. There's no real like sense of incoming despair. Like it just sort of happens and then it's immediately forgotten about in order to return to fucking Remina running around with her simps. It's extremely frustrating. It could have been legitimately great. Like I don't think I don't think I disliked it either. Like most of my complaints are mostly about how it's not really good, but at the same time, like it's not exactly bad either. Like I said, like there's something to be said about the nature of fame and the expectations that fans have for their celebrities and their communities, their fan clubs, right? Like there's like a statement to be made there, but like Remina was not the story to tell that, or at least not in this fashion. Like I don't care for Remina at all. Like I spent this entire manga reading about her getting beat up and emotionally abused. Like, and I didn't really her father dying, like everybody, like a bunch of people around her like backstabbing her, and I didn't really feel anything. Like in a lot of ways, it kind of sucks to say this because I think Remina is a perfectly reasonably nice person and things like that, but I did not care for the character. Like I did not care for what she was going through. I did not care about I did not care what was going to happen to her. I did not care about the people she met or the ideas depicted. Like she really does just go around like sort of moping all the time, like just sort of crying about how she doesn't want this, like how it's too much for her too much for her to handle. Like even the last panel is just like her like just staring out of a window. Like not the last panel, but like that's her entire character, is just like the sort of person who just like stares out of a window and doesn't actually do anything. Like she is an extremely one-dimensional character. Like I've complained about like Ito's characters being like one-dimensional before, but like in a lot of cases, I think Remina is probably the worst example of that. Like Tomie and Uzumaki, I think, kind of depict and Gio to an extent, kind of have a little bit of a personality, a little bit of edge to those characters that really give them a little bit more depth than you might expect, especially in the case of Tomie. Not so much in Remina. Like, Remina starts off as this mopey teenage girl and ends up as a mopey teenage girl. Like, I don't really, I don't care for the character. I don't... Like, there's no progression there. Like, it almost feels like the planet wasn't eaten at all. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they have spaceships. Like, did people survive? Like, is Remina still gonna come after them? Like, what's the deal with that? Well, anyway, again, like, there's nothing really noteworthy about this one. It's set in the future. Like, they have like flying cars and shit like that. They have spaceships, but like, it doesn't feel any different than any other Junji Ito story I've read. Like, honestly, I would suggest like I would suggest skipping it. Like, a part of me was, I remember seeing the first panel of this, like with the giant eye looking down at the girl on the cross and thinking it looked like the most badass shit imaginable. This one, for example, and it's one of those cases where the first panel in the entire fucking thing is somehow the best one. Like, it's all potential, no actual substance. Highly suggest skipping this one.